pretty much the whole of the country as we go through Thursday, and so that means it is going to be a chillier day, but much fewer showers around. In fact, it's looking largely dry. Yes, some showers around coastal parts, but many places having a dry day on Thursday and sticking with that drier theme until the weekend. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really could.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight, the dangerous, brazen foreign criminals that foreign judges say we can't deport. We have to stop this madness. And
7 people killed and 48 injured, 21 of them in critical condition. A third major attack in 3 months.
Al-Qaeda and ISIS are back on the rise in Britain and they're ready to attack. Would a war in the Middle East unleash the Islamist enemy that we've let fester in Britain? Also, mass immigration has fueled our fastest population growth ever. Can you get a GP appointment? Plus,
focus is on growth. That's been the missing ingredient for the last 14 years.
Well, it turns out that Britain is suffering the worst millionaire exodus in the world. And
an obsession with the 7% of children who are in our private schools. I'm more interested in the 93% of children who are in our state schools.
Snarky, envious Labour slam private schools. But it turns out the report saying the VAT hike would be OK was written by a Labour minister's close friend. Oh, and?
But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step.
Oh, yeah, stand down. Starmer has been referred to the police over potential breaches of electoral law. Will he have to resign also?
Bosses got their backs against the wall and they're being questioned. They'll then deliver a sob story.
Every time Labour's Dawn Butler opens her eyes, she sees more racism. On my panel tonight, it's the columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and the journalist Jonathan Liss. Oh, and I will take you live to Florida, where Hurricane Milton is set to wreak havoc. In fact, it's supposedly going to crash into Florida whilst I'm on air. So get ready, Britain. Here we go. Foreign judges and foreign criminals have no place in Britain. Next.
Good evening, it's 9 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie here in the GB newsroom. James Cleverly has overtaken Robert Jenrick to the top spot in the latest round of voting to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Cleverly leads the pack with 39 votes, Robert Jenrick second with 31 and Kemi Badenoch third on 30. Tom Tugendhat has now been eliminated from the race with only 20 votes. The final two will be decided from the remaining three candidates at the next round of voting tomorrow afternoon. The Director General of MI5 has warned that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are on the rise, with an increased terror risk linked to the conflict in the Middle East. In a stark warning at the Counter-Terrorism Operations Centre, Ken McCullen revealed that Iran has been linked to at least 20 deadly plots in the UK over the past 2 years. He says both groups are attempting to export terror, highlighting the recent deadly attacks in Moscow as a brutal demonstration of what ISIS is still capable of. As the conflict between Israel and Iran intensifies, MI5 is on high alert for potential domestic repercussions. So Keir Starmer is set for crucial talks in Berlin, joining leaders from the US, France and Germany this Saturday. The meeting will focus on the ongoing war in Ukraine and the escalating situation in the Middle East. It comes as tensions rise in Lebanon, prompting urgent diplomatic efforts among the so-called Quad nations. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the meeting highlights the UK's commitment to tracking international issues alongside its allies. Water companies in England and Wales have been ordered to return more than £157 million to customers for failing to meet crucial targets on pollution and interruption to services. Ofwat has demanded the money come off the bills for households and businesses from next year. It follows a previous order to repay £114 million last year. The UK population has seen its largest annual increase in size since 1971. The Office for National Statistics estimates the total population grew by 1% in just a year, reaching 68.3 million by mid-2023, covering England, Scotland, Wales and, of course, Northern Ireland. The ONS says migration was the main factor behind the latest rise, as deaths exceeded births by around 16,300 in the same period. And finally, as you've just been hearing, as Hurricane Milton makes its way towards Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis says, if you stay, you will die. Satellite images show the storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico with winds almost reaching up to 180 miles an hour. Forecasters are warning of 8 to 12-foot storm surges, the highest ever recorded in the region. And of course, with widespread flooding expected as well. It comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the southeastern part of the United States. Well, those are your latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Lewis Mackenzie. More from me in an hour's time, but now it's back to Patrick.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Foreign judges should not be able to tell us that we cannot deport foreign criminals. This is Dorian Puka. He's Albanian, he's 28 years old. He's been jailed for burglary and deported twice. Well, he sneaked back into Britain, and here's the latest. Yeah, that's right. He posted a video of himself driving a £300,000 Ferrari. We are powerless to deport him until his latest asylum claim has been fully heard. And even if we do decide to, then he will just go to the ECHR and they'll probably let him stay. Like this other Albanian criminal, Ardit Binaj, who also liked to rob people. Binaj entered the UK illegally in a lorry in 2014 before being arrested the next year for burglary. He was jailed for 30 months in 2016 for the break-in, alongside a 6-month prison term for another burglary and 18 weeks for a separate theft. He was freed 6 months later and deported. Within months, he broke back into Britain. He found himself a nice Lithuanian girlfriend who he had a child with. He then used the ECHR's right to a family life to be allowed to stay in Britain. The whole thing is a complete joke, isn't it? But they're not the only ones. We've had rapists, murderers and terrorists, like Wabi Mohammed, who plotted the infamous July 2005 failed bombings in London, which came weeks after the 7/7 bombings, which killed 52 people. The Somalian national was imprisoned for 17 years before seeing his sentence reduced to 13 on appeal. He cannot be deported after arguing that he may face inhumane treatment in his native country, which would breach Article 3 of the ECHR and, of course, would be a massive shame. Ismail Abdurrahman, one of Mohammed's accomplices, was jailed for 10 years in 2008, which was reduced to 8 on appeal. However, his lawyers successfully argued that if he was sent back to Somalia, his human rights may be breached as well. The government were forced to actually pay him 13 grand after the ECHR found that Scotland Yard failed to ensure his rights to a fair trial and legal assistance. In August 2021, he was jailed again, this time for 8 months for breaching his bail conditions. Look, some of these foreign judges are from places like Bosnia, Monaco, Armenia, Andorra, Slovenia and San Marino. San Marino has a population of 33,660. So you could fit their entire population into Brighton and Hove Albion's football stadium. People always say, well, only Belarus and Russia aren't in the ECHR. Yeah, well, neither are Canada, Japan and Australia. And they're not exactly despotic regimes, are they? People say, oh, Winston Churchill, he helped create the thing, didn't he? All right, well, Winston Churchill did not help to create it so that Albanian drug lords and Islamist terrorists could be told that they could stay in Britain by a judge from a country that is essentially a hernia on the stomach of Italy. We need to either ignore the ECHR or leave. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. I am joined, as ever, by the columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku. We've also got the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and the journalist Jonathan Liss.
That is so rude to the people of San Marino. I think you should apologise. A hernia. It's a beautiful little country.
I have been.
That was a good quip. It's gorgeous.
It's more of a size reference. Anyway, let's get back on track. So,
size doesn't matter.
I don't know who told you that. All right, OK. We're in the gutter already. Stephen, I'm going to just go straight down the line to you and just say, look, what do we do about the amount of Albanian wrong'uns that the ECHR is demanding that we keep in Britain?
Deport first. Appeal later. We have that in legislation. We have that under our immigration laws. So it's not within the wit of man that we have legislation passed by our own parliament that enables us to override the ECHR in these circumstances, for us to be able to say, as the Home Secretary, but it takes a very strong Home Secretary to actually do that. And so if they did, then we'd have Super Sambuca Duka being deported instead of sitting there drinking Sambuca, watching TikTok and driving a £300,000 car. All it comes down to is the political will of this Home Secretary to do the right thing, carry out the legislation, deport first, appeal later, and we have lots of sections to do it. Otherwise, then we go to the nuclear bomb in terms of legislation and leave the ECHR. I've said it for nearly a decade. It would do us a pile of good to do so, and then we could remove all the legislation that is in our own UK law that leads these people to stay.
Look, it's putting us at risk, isn't it? I mean,
there'll always be frustrating cases like this that really shouldn't happen, particularly on the scale that they do. I mean, Abdulaziz is one of the first ones that really came into public consciousness. I think the issue here is the complex around it. So the charity industrial complex around this, the human rights lawyers and the judges, and who's funding these institutions and these individuals that are heading up these cases for people like this, a convicted burglar, to argue that he should stay in the UK because he has a
so you'd go after the lawyers?
Well, but this is the thing. It's not just one person. It's not individual cases like this, and they don't just happen. They don't just come out of nowhere. They're part of a system, right, of a charity industrial complex and of these human rights lawyers and all of that choose cases, and they choose to pursue cases that are against the national security interests of the UK. Now, obviously, the argument should be, yes, the people that are meant to enforce our national security interests should deport first and then ask questions later. However, you also have to tackle the system within which these people operate.
It's a good point. It's a great point. So I'll put that to you then, Jonathan. You know, I mean, look, some of the rulings recently by the ECHR raised eyebrows. I mean, I think they backed Greta Thunberg and a load of geriatric Swiss women who said that their lives were being impeded.
What did you drink this evening?
No, nothing. Not these days. Remarkably, this is me.
But fire.
But over the eco-lunacy, right? So that was seen by many as a kind of oddly political move. So if it could be argued that the ECHR might be a bit political, and then the lawyers who are bringing all of these cases are definitely political, then we do have a problem with our system, don't we? We've got lefties who are making us all more dangerous.
Patrick, just because you disagree with the ruling, it doesn't make it flawed. It doesn't make the court against you or political. It just ruled against some. It just ruled in a way that you didn't like. The problem with human rights, Patrick, is that they apply to everybody, not just the people that we like. I don't much like the cut of that guy's jib either, I can tell you. But actually, you conflated two separate cases there. So this guy, who's claiming asylum, one would expect that claim for asylum would be rejected and there's nothing. He'd have to have a very good reason. He'd have to have something like the right to family life, and that's where it comes to the other case which you just mentioned.
That's the thing. This argument that human rights are equally applied is not true.
You have certain human rights in this country, whether we like it or not. And even if you were to leave the ECHR, a British Bill of Rights that replaced it would also, I guarantee you, establish the right to family life as well. It's not his child's fault, is it?
But Jonathan, isn't the point that Patrick and others, and those like myself, who say, here you're saying he has human rights, but what about the rights of the victims? What about the rights of the state?
Well, that's what I was going to say.
And isn't the ECHR the fact that it's no longer balancing those two equally? What it's saying is, here we have a de facto criminal who sneaked in, which is illegal in its own right. He then claims Article 8, I've got a family, I can stay. So is there not a case somewhere along the lines legally that says a nation state should be able to balance those rights and say that is not a human right that we recognise for a criminal who's a non-UK citizen?
I don't see how it benefits the victim for a child to be denied his father, for example.
No one is denying the child. The child can go to where the father is. Hold on, but this idea of the human rights being applied equally and consistently and all that's a fallacy, right? Human rights means different things in other parts of the world, and I think when you have a situation where you have a cabal of human rights lawyers and judges that are basically deciding what human rights are and who gets the benefit of them and whose human rights trumps others, because now basically what happened is this person's human rights trumps the human rights to security of the British nationals. Right? Yeah. And I think that's where the problem is. We're under this impression that when you operate under the rubric of human rights, everything is settled. But it's actually, it's a creation of this elite group of legal practitioners that actually has real-world consequences, but is not consistently applied.
And I think one other problem with it as well. It's not just that those lawyers who are specialising in this area. The area is that it's about the academics. We have academics that are sitting as judges on the ECHR. You don't have to be a proper judge as we'd understand it, someone who sits in a criminal case.
What you're telling me is that chap from San Marino...
He could be just a lecturer.
Might not even be a judge.
No, he's just a lecturer because it's deemed a lawyer.
Is there a University of San Marino? Anyway,
and if he's appointed to that role as a lecturer, and I do have problems with lecturers being able to rule on judgments in cases because they have no real-life experience in the court of real life.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I'm sorry, I don't believe that the academia left-wing bias stops when you hit the channel. I imagine that there is quite a lot of that going around. Look, you know, Jonathan, when I look around now, you're shaking your head about it.
Because it's completely not true that
academia is completely not true. It's like
there are so many right-wing academics.
Tofu-eating, Guardian-reading woker ass.
Obviously trying to wind me up.
Okay, that's a complete fallacy. I'm sorry. Like this idea that there's a balance. You realise that the academia is a self-perpetuating industry. If you are a right-wing academic, it's hard to get funding. It's hard to even get hired.
It's hard to get a job.
Exactly. This idea that there is some sort of neutrality and it's just people on the right that are whinging is not actually
Talk about human rights. Talk about human rights.
I have no investment in
Talk about human rights. You know, I would argue that it's a pensioner's human right, someone who's been in our armed forces, to be able to turn their heating on this winter without worrying about whether or not they are going to have to, you know, go without food for a week. But we do have our chap from Albania there, who's a criminal, and his human right to razz a Ferrari around the streets of Britain appears to trump that, does it?
Well, I don't think anyone's arguing that it's a human right to drive a Ferrari. But it's not a crime to drive a Ferrari unless he's stolen it. So that's...
But it's a human right to be protected.
Do you wonder where he got the money?
It's a human right to be protected from illegal migrants entering this country and burglaring your house. It's a human right to have yourself protected from a foreign national coming over here and raping your daughter. It's a human right not to have yourself abused or beaten on the streets of your own country because the ECHR protects you. Now, if I'm going to lose my rag about this, it's because I'm angry about foreign nationals being able to come here and our incompetent Home Secretaries from being able to deport them when they commit crimes like this. The people of this country should be protected. They're not at the moment, and they're being aided and abetted by a common law that's accepted the European Court of Human Rights.
Why should we be more angry about foreigners committing crimes than anyone else committing crimes?
Because we shouldn't be importing more problems.
Because you're importing
it. You could say it's a human right to be protected from any crime. I would say yes. It doesn't
Absolutely.
Actually, why does it matter so much? Obviously, we need to stop dangerous people being on our streets. I'm just more interested in that than where they come from.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, go and ask some of the people who've suffered at the hands of some of these people.
But the majority of criminals in this country are not
I'll tell you why.
immigrants.
It's avoidable. That's the problem. Why should we be more incensed? Because it's avoidable to not have people, foreign nationals, committing crimes in this country. We don't have to import those problems. That's the difference.
We should do our best not to as well.
Wonderful people. We're going to have to crack on. Thank you very much. Lovely start to proceedings. Now, talking of things you can obviously get for free in Britain, it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 in your bank account each month for the next year. That is £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need to make that money yours.
Good luck.
Still to come, an unlikely alliance of independent schools, teaching unions and tax experts have joined forces to heap pressure on the government to delay the planned private school VAT tax raid amid fears that it will wreak havoc with kids' education. Oh, and it does turn out as well. A key report that Starmer used to justify this tax hike was written by a government minister's best mate. So is it not high time the government U-turned on this policy? Former Labour Minister Jeff Hoon, well, he doesn't think so. He joins me soon. But next, it just gets worse and worse for Labour. Britain is set to suffer the biggest exodus of millionaires in the entire world, which Jonathan Liss thinks is great until he has to start paying for everything as wealthy foreigners flee the UK ahead of the government's non-dom crackdown. So has Labour's economic credibility been shattered? Going head-to-head on that are the entrepreneur and businessman Mike Green and former Labour MP Sean Simon. Stay tuned.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19 books. TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, 7, 8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes. I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last of good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And, of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
Yeah, you are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which, of course, you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names. Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth
Dean
Taylor.
Martin.
Dean
Gregory
Martin.
Peck.
Gregory Peck.
Richard Burton.
Richard Burton, Paul Newman, the list goes
Gene
on
Kelly,
and on. And
my
Gene Kelly.
favourite.
Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, should the government U-turn on its private school VAT raid? It turns out that one of the reports that was written to back it up was written by a Labour minister's best mate, and nobody could have seen that coming, could they? But first, has Labour's economic credibility now been absolutely shattered? It's time for the head-to-head. So Chancellor Rachel Reeves has today been dealt a serious blow after damning analysis revealed that Britain is set to suffer the biggest exodus of millionaires in the entire world ahead of Labour's planned raid on non-doms. The share of the population who are millionaires is expected to plunge by a shocking 20% over the next 5 years. This isn't just foreign people, by the way. This is British-based millionaires as well. That's according to the analysis from the Adam Smith Institute. So it comes after Labour placed a £1 billion crackdown on non-doms at the heart of their manifesto, with the money raised set to be used to prop up ailing public services. But Rachel Reeves is now reconsidering that policy after it emerged. Now, wait for this, because, again, no one could have seen this coming. It could end up costing the government £1 billion in reduced tax revenue if wealthy foreigners flee the country. So tonight I'm asking, has Labour's economic credibility been shattered? Let me know your thoughts, gbnews.com/yours say. Tweet me at GBNews. While you're there, go and vote in our poll. The results will probably follow quite soon. Joining me now for this are former Labour MP Sean Simon and entrepreneur Mike Green. Chaps, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Mike, I'll start with you. Has Labour's economic credibility been shattered in a way that will inevitably end up costing us all money?
Well, I'm not sure they ever had any economic credibility. I mean, if you look back 100 years, you'll see every Labour government has left the country broke. But more importantly, if you look back over the last few months, as they've been talking about some of these policies, a 12-year-old doing an economics GCE could have told you that if you overtax people who are already paying 60% in real terms on all of their money, they're going to leave. We are literally killing the golden geese that are laying the eggs that are making it possible for others not to pay so much tax. It's going to be the middle classes that get squeezed here. The work shy and unemployed aren't paying anymore. The low incomes probably won't pay anymore. It'll be the middle classes, because the real income earners who pay the top 10% being 60% of revenue, the top 1% being 29%, they can get out. They can make alternative arrangements. It's ludicrous. If she doesn't U-turn on this, then millions of people will pay more taxes who can ill afford it.
Well, it'll be interesting, won't it, Sean? See, because if she doesn't U-turn on this, then really this is just classic socialism, isn't it? They don't mind if the poor get poorer as long as the rich get poorer as well. Because there's actually no economic case to press ahead with this. We've been told it's not going to raise any money.
I mean, there is a credibility question here, but it's not a Labour credibility question. I mean, this is a really daft story, isn't it, by an anti-Labour campaign group? I mean, what a nonsensical idea that 20% of the richest people are going to leave in response to something that at the same time you're telling us is actually not going to happen. I mean, which is it? A 20%, 1 in 5 rich people leaving, or is actually she's going to U-turn? I mean, we might as well get that clear first, surely.
Sean, this isn't a prediction. This is a reality, Sean. This is happening. I've done 2 podcasts in the last week alone with accountants, one based in Dubai, one based in Cyprus. They're seeing 10 times as many customers coming to them. And these aren't millionaires and billionaires at a high level necessarily, although many of them have gone. I'm going to be on Saturday, I'm going to be with Alfie Best in Monaco. We've lost hundreds of millions. We're going to lose hundreds of his employees. But this is people who are perhaps only worth 500, 600, 700,000. Now, that's a lot of money. I get that. But that's money that's leaving the UK. It is happening. It's not a prediction. Yeah. It is happening.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Look, just to pick through what you said before, so because sorry, I couldn't really figure out what it was you were saying. You just don't buy the fact that some of the world's wealthiest, most mobile people would leave because Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are about to clobber them. You just think, out of the goodness of their heart, they will stay and just hand over a load of money to Keir Starmer so he can just toss it around everywhere.
Let me try and express it in simpler terms.
Thank you, Sean.
At the same time, you and the Adam Smith Institute are projecting that 1 in 5 British millionaires will leave over the course of the Parliament, brackets, which is absurd. At the same time as that, you and you collectively are saying, actually, she's not going to do this because she's realised it's a mistake. She's about to U-turn.
No, I'm not.
Is she going to U-turn, or are they going to leave?
I hate to do this, mate, but I'll obviously have to use simpler terms. We're not saying that. Well, what I am saying is that she's considering it, apparently, and I'm asking you whether or not you think she should U-turn on this policy. So do you think she should U-turn, Sean?
So I don't know whether she should U-turn. What's being reported is that the Treasury, now that they've got into government, are saying, actually, you're not going to raise as much money from this as you think you are.
And why is... No, right, stop right there. And why is that, Sean? Because millionaires are leaving. So it's absurd what the Adam Smith Institute say, but when the Treasury say it, then that's fine.
Yeah, not 20% of millionaires, not a fifth of all the rich people in the country.
Just enough to make it not worth anyone's while. Yeah, just enough so that it won't raise a penny. All right, fine. Well, we can argue about the amount of millionaires who are going to leave, but, you know, the fact is it's not going to raise any money, is it?
Let's say it's only 10%, Sean, and we're talking hundreds of millions, billions of pounds. Where do you think that is going to be topped up by? Who's going to pay that? Do you think the millionaires aren't going to find ways to protect themselves? They've got great accountants. Of course, I am going to do that. This is going to fall on the shoulders, not of the people with the broadest shoulders. It's going to fall on the shoulders of hardworking people that are caught in the middle.
I mean, it's not, is it? That isn't what the issue is. The issue is, does a lot of very rich capital leave the country because they're non-doms? I mean, hard-working, normal middle-class people are not non-doms, are they?
OK, all right. I'm just wondering, Sean, you know, how you feel about the idea that, you know, this multi-millionaire Labour leader who's embroiled in this donor gate and, you know, potential electoral law issues surrounded by, you know, gosh, a couple of other very well-off people, etc. With multiple... I mean, how many homes has Keir Starmer got now? He's got Downing Street. He's got his one in Kentish Town. He can use Lord Alley's pad. He can use Chequers. He's got 4 homes, Keir. Good gosh. And he could potentially is about to preside over huge amounts of tax rises for everybody else. But you know, do you not find that a bit rum, Sean?
I mean, there's no evidence that he's about to preside over huge tax rises from everybody else. Well, the truth is, what the evidence is that they've inherited an economy with a higher rate of taxation than we've had for decades in this country, and they've promised to not raise all the main big taxes that affect most normal working people most of the time, and they've promised not to raise borrowing. So they are very, very boxed in and restricted in what they can do. The idea they're going to
they have raised borrowing. They just borrowed 3.1 billion. Sure, they just borrowed 3.1 billion pounds to pay the unions. They've done it. They've already done it. I mean, Ed Miliband, sorry, Sean. Ed Miliband spent the black hole, £22 billion on carbon capture in the northeast last week. They're doing it.
He didn't.
Well, and
he
he's
didn't
not even
spend
spending that
22
on trees. He wants to spend it on carbon capture machines. Aren't we better to put more trees in?
What he wants to do is invest in green technology to grow the economy. Because ultimately,
people on the left call it investment. Obviously, people on the right call it splashing a load of other people's money up the wall, don't they? But anyway, all right, chaps. We did manage to veer away from the topic there, but I did have fun. Thank you very, very much. Former Labour MP Sean Simon, their entrepreneur Mike Green. Take it easy. Right, who do you agree with? Has Labour's economic credibility been shattered? Joan on your say says Labour will bankrupt the country. They'll still crack ahead with the winter fuel payment cut. George says Labour has no economic understanding. If they want growth, we need the millionaires to create jobs, tax revenue to build their businesses here. It's basic. Laura says, I really don't think it could get worse than it was under the Tories, but I think it might. OK, well, there we go. Coming up, they were once the king and queen of daytime TV.
Right, deep breath. Firstly, are you OK? I hope so. Feels very strange indeed sitting here without Phil.
OK. But now Philip Schofield has sensationally accused his former co-star Holly Willoughby of orchestrating his downfall. He's even branded her a witch. So is the former ITV presenter the most vindictive man in TV? And is he intent on all-out revenge? Showbiz journalist Sarah Louise Robertson has got the inside track. She joins me very soon. But first...
An obsession with the 7% of children who are in our private schools. I'm more interested in the 93% of children who are in our state schools.
Well, the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has now been branded divisive and stupid for a recent post on social media that pitted private school pupils against state school kids. But she's got a battle on her hands because there's this unlikely alliance now of trade unions, independent schools and tax experts have all joined forces to heap pressure on the government to delay the private school VAT raid. Isn't it high time the government U-turned on this policy as well? Former Labour Minister Jeff Hoon, he's backing the government, obviously, and he joins me live.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead, and by Thursday, things are looking largely dry, but quite a bit colder than of late. For the time being, though, still plenty of wet weather around. Low pressure dominating the story across the UK. It's this low pressure that has brought all the heavy thundery showers many of us have seen through today, and there will be some further showers as we go through the next few hours across England and Wales, but many of them clearing away towards the east overnight. Some persistent rain continuing, though, across parts of northern England and eastern Scotland, so staying pretty soggy here. With quite a bit of cloud around, temperatures won't drop a huge amount, especially in the towns and cities, many places holding up in double figures. There will be generally fewer showers around tomorrow, but there will be some. In fact, even from the start across far southern parts of England, a few showers quite likely, perhaps a little bit drier across central southern parts of Wales and the Midlands for a time, but further north, northern England, plenty of wet weather around, some outbreaks of rain which could be quite heavy, and more persistent rain affecting eastern parts of Scotland. A very soggy start to the day here. As we go through the day, the rain across parts of Scotland and northern England will continue for a time, but it should start to break up as we go through into the afternoon and early evening. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers around, not as many as we've seen through today, and they're not looking quite as intense, less likely to have the odd rumble of thunder, but still some heavy ones possible. And temperatures in the north starting to drop down as we get a northerly wind making its way across the country. That northerly wind then will push its way southwards across pretty much the whole of the country as we go through Thursday, and so that means it is going to be a chillier day, but much fewer showers around. In fact, it's looking largely dry. Yes, some showers around coastal parts, but many places having a dry day on Thursday and sticking with that drier theme until the weekend. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight, and it's emerged today that a close friend of a government minister wrote a crucial report that Labour has repeatedly used to justify its VAT raid on private schools. So Matthew Pennycook, a minister in the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, was reportedly the best man at the wedding of Luke Sibieta, who authored the Institute for Fiscal Studies report that found the policy could raise more than £1 billion for the Treasury. Well, it comes as this unlikely alliance now of independent schools, teaching unions and tax experts joined forces yesterday to heap pressure on the government to delay this tax raid on private schools amid fears that it could wreak havoc with kids' education. The Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, has also been branded divisive and stupid for a recent post on social media. She said, our state schools need teachers more than private schools need embossed stationery. Our children need mental health support more than private schools need new pools. Our students need careers advice more than private schools need AstroTurf pitches. Well, with me now is Jeff Hoon, former Labour Minister. Jeff, thank you very, very much.
Good evening, Patrick.
How are you? So it looks as though maybe Labour have been at it again, Jeff, that all is not as it seems, that this report that gave them a glowing response for their policy turns out to be written by, well, shock horror, a mate.
Well, first of all, I've looked at the report and it isn't glowing. There's lots of criticism, actually, of the policy. It's a fairly balanced report. And I think those that are criticising the author are playing the man rather than the ball. The issue is this report on its own merits a proper consideration of this policy? And I can't see that there's anything wrong with the report. Whatever the relationship between its author and the minister seems to be wholly irrelevant if people are saying actually the report is well balanced, which they are.
Well, isn't the main thing wrong with it that it's just factually inaccurate because it's not going to raise £1 billion?
Well, I understand that the report talks about raising between 1.3 and 1.5 billion pounds, so that seems to be in the right ballpark. It's around the figure that the government have been talking about.
Yeah, but the government, I think, are quite wrong about this, aren't they? I mean, where's the evidence that it is going to raise this amount of money? I mean, they're saying that we need it for more teachers. Well, I think it's one teacher for every 4 state schools, which, given the idea that, several tens of thousands of children are now going to be pumped into the state school system in high pockets in certain areas, it's not going to be enough, is it? It doesn't seem to really add up.
I'm not sure that is the calculation that is borne out. I also have just read the House of Commons report on this proposal, and it talks about 3 to 7% perhaps dropping out, that very uncertain figure. After all, it's quite clear that fees in private education have been going up substantially in recent years. That doesn't seem to have affected decision by parents to continue to pay for their children.
Well, it is affecting it now, though, isn't it? Because there's 10,000 fewer children in private schools ahead of Labour's VAT tax policy. So things have changed. That has changed. And can I ask, why does Labour want to look so bitter about all of this, do you think?
I don't think it's a question of bitterness. It's really a question of principle, and I'm glad that you've got around to that, because the reality is that this affords a tax break to private education, and the taxpayer is subsidising private education. Now, there might be an argument for that, but it isn't essential. And I would have thought that most people would accept that if VAT is applied to a whole range of services, it should be applied equally to fees for private education. I can't see anything wrong with that in principle.
But aren't parents who send their children to private school just paying twice? Therefore, your argument completely falls down. They're paying for everybody else's education through tax, and then they pay for their own child's education through paying for it themselves, Jeff.
But that's a choice they make, and that's a choice that should be...
No. So they're paying twice, aren't they? So they are paying twice. So this idea that they're getting a tax break, Jeff, and that everyone else is paying for is complete rubbish, isn't it?
No, it's not, because actually, if you look at the VAT rules, the exemption for private education is set out in the legislation. If that exemption was not there, then they would have to pay VAT.
Right. So someone who goes to Eton or, I don't know, Marlborough or wherever super poshos, turbo poshos send their kids, right? They're not bothered, are they? They just crack on. They pay 40 grand a term or whatever it is for little Hugo and Horatio to go and crack on and have a great time. But people who've really had to scrimp and save to send their kids to a £8,000 or £10,000 a year private school who now can't do it, they're the ones that suffer. And I'll ask you the same question that I asked our mate Sean Simon before, which is this not socialism in a nutshell, Jeff? You don't care if the poor get poorer, as long as the rich get poorer as well. It's the politics of envy.
Well, to repeat the point I made a few minutes ago, the reality is that fees for private education have been increasing year on year, well above the rate of inflation. That doesn't appear to have had any impact on the numbers of people sending their children to private education. It's a choice those parents make. It's a choice for them. No one's interfering with their choice. It simply doesn't seem right in principle that they should get a tax break, a subsidy from the taxpayer for doing so.
OK, all right. And this idea now that, these private schools, they need it more, they need embossed stationery, etc. Do you not think that's a bit needlessly divisive? I mean, the irony is if she'd have written that down, she probably would have used embossed stationery from the House of Commons, no?
I think the reality is that we need to focus on the principle, which is what I've been trying to do, and you've encouraged me to do that.
Yeah, because I don't see what the principle is, Joe. I can't see what the principle is. The principle is you look at some people who've really scrimped and saved to send their children to a private school because they've made a decision that they would quite like their child to maybe be a bit safer at school and do all that. And the Labour Party have come in and gone, screw you, you're going to go to Stab City Comprehensive.
That's not what the Labour is saying at all. There is no reason why parents cannot continue to send their children into private education. The reality is, for the moment, they are getting a subsidy from the taxpayer. And I think it's important to emphasise that without the exemption already built into the legislation passed by Parliament...
Did you go to private school?
VAT would be payable.
Did you go to private school?
Take it away. Sorry.
Did you go to private school out of interest?
I went to a private school, yes.
Right, yeah. And was that nice for you? It set you up nicely in life, didn't it, Jeff? That was great.
Well, the reality was I got a scholarship paid for by the local
Great, but then this is part of the problem, isn't it? Because the reason they can give out scholarships, Jeff, is because they're well-funded and they put a bit of money in the bank. You probably wouldn't have been able to go if this had been the case. Goodness knows where you would have ended up, although obviously you are incredibly bright and genuinely, no doubt, would have done very well anyway. But my point is this, it helps people on bursaries and stuff, Jeff, doesn't it?
I don't think that's the same issue, is it? Because the reality is, I mean, my scholarship was 100%, so my parents didn't pay anything, so they wouldn't have paid anything extra anyway. And I think the important exemption that the government have indicated in relation to children with educational difficulties, I think that's quite right. I think there are ways of looking at other assistance to those who are less well off, who are struggling to pay fees.
All right, mate. Look, thank you very much. I do always appreciate your time, Jeff. Lovely stuff. Take care. Jeff Hoon there, former Labour Minister. Right, coming up, massive surge now in net migration has driven the fastest increase in the size of the UK population since the 1970s. But, can you get a GP appointment? Schools, again, housing crisis. Is it affecting all of our lives? First, though, they were once the king and queen of daytime telly.
Right, deep breath. Firstly, are you OK? I hope so. Feels very strange indeed sitting here without Phil.
Now, Philip Schofield has accused his former co-star and close pal Holly Willoughby of orchestrating his downfall. It appears he's intent on all-out revenge. Sarah Louise Robertson, showbiz journalist, joins me next. Stay tuned.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Well, the first thing on in my mind when I heard about this is, what has this country come to when we're talking about getting kids as young as 6 years old to be jabbed weekly or however often it is, because they are too fat? Where are the parents in all of this? There's three things actually here that are important. Number one is we do not know the long-term consequences of these jabs. So if I had a child and I was going to let them do, have the jab, I would be feeling like I'm treating them like a lab rat, to be quite honest with you, because we don't know the long-term consequences. Secondly, the manufacturers are clear that some of the potential side effects can be very serious. We're talking about potentially pancreatitis, let's get my word out, and also it lists as a potential side effect thyroid cancer. Arguably, it's called the gamble jab, to be honest with you, because of these potential side effects at the moment. And then thirdly, I come back to the parents. Where are the parents in all of this? Because they are the role models. So it really is about parenting, and it's about parenting from being a role model yourself in terms of being slim and healthy, and not expecting a jab to take your place and other people to take your place. If you have children, they are your responsibility. Think before you breed. The other thing you need to remember with this is when you stop taking that jab, it is highly likely that you're going to put all the weight back on. Now, the thought of a child of 6 years of age, starting with that jab, conditioning them mentally to live with that jab, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely not on.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up is mass immigration making all of our lives worse. But first, they were once the king and queen of daytime telly, but now their friendship appears to be lying in tatters after it emerged today that Philip Schofield blamed his former co-star Holly Willoughby for his downfall, accused her of not coming to his aid, and, well, his career crashed and burned, didn't it? But according to the Daily Mirror, Philip blasted Holly via a series of explosive WhatsApp messages the day before he was axed by ITV, after she reportedly ignored his pleas for a show of public support, such as a statement or a picture. Well, he left this morning, last May, following months of speculation about a breakdown in his relationship. He then admitted to having an affair with a junior colleague and left ITV altogether. Now, apparently, he refers to Holly, who was one of his closest pals, as the witch who brought him down. Joining me now is showbiz journalist Sarah Louise Robertson. Great to have you on the show, Sarah. Thank you very much. Should people be afraid of Schofield's attempts at all-out revenge?
Well, this is a man who is absolutely fueled by self-pity, Patrick. He seems to be hell-bent on this mission of settling scores, and woe betide anybody who gets in Schofield's way. We've seen, obviously, the language that he's used to insult Holly with. I mean, this was the person who was once called his TV sister. They were joined at the hip at one point, and he's really left no stone unturned in the way that he's calling her now and other former colleagues and friends of his at ITV. And he just seems hell-bent on this mission of taking down anybody who, in his self-pitying monologue, in his head, seems to be the people he's blaming for losing his television career on ITV, or shall we say, he's blaming everybody but himself for what happened, for his fall from grace into disgrace.
I just wonder if it's a missed opportunity of Philip Schofield. I thought he maybe had two options, right, which was either just to crawl away under a rock and never be seen again, or come back.
Which we thought.
Which I would probably have my money on.
Yeah.
Or come back and go, right, look, so sorry, I've done, done wrong here. And actually done neither of those things. He's just come out and gone, it was your fault, it was your fault, it was your fault.
Yes.
Maybe he needs to buy a mirror.
That's exactly it, Patrick. You've hit the nail on the head. I think at the time, people thought, that's it. He's gone. We'll never see him again. That's the end of that. But no, he is come back, all guns blazing, but he's showing no signs whatsoever of contrition. Not at one point did he say in this TV show, Castaway, which, can I just say, the enormous privilege that's been afforded to him, that he's had a 3-part series dedicated solely to himself. When other people have fallen from disgrace, the likes of Matt Hancock, he had to go back on I'm a Celebrity and redeem himself and do all those trials and make a fool of himself. Philip's done none of that. He would obviously refuse to go on I'm a Celebrity because of the channel that it's showing on. But he's had a huge platform with which to redeem himself to the public. And you think he would use that as a chance of introspection and holding a mirror up, as you say, Patrick, to himself and his own misdemeanors and saying, actually, OK, I do apologise. Yeah, I should have done things better. I shouldn't have acted the way I did. It was inappropriate. I lied to my family. I lied to my colleagues. I lied to my friends about having an affair with a much younger junior member of staff, not just a colleague, a junior member of staff. That's obviously a whole separate issue. But the point is, he didn't do any of that. He just used this programme with which to absolutely slate Holly and his former colleagues who were one-time good friends of his, and obviously the channel itself, ITV. And he just went for it, all guns blazing. And it hasn't gone down well with critics. It really hasn't.
No, it's not. Look, we've only got about a minute left. There's talk of the BBC offering him stuff. I mean, surely he's the last person they want stalking their corridors.
Well, I mean, the BBC, let's face it, with the disgrace that they've had going on recently in presenters, feels probably a good match for them. You know what I'm talking about there, Patrick. But I think that's because he chose, didn't he, Amal Rojan to go onto his show and give that interview. So I think there was maybe a little bit of camaraderie there. And so, I don't know. I mean, look, Phil was a very, very good presenter. I'm not going to take that away from him. He was brilliant at what he did.
Yeah.
But I think now, really, he's tarnished his own image, and the public aren't impressed with this woe is me, self-pity monologue that we've seen come from him, and calling a woman a witch. Come on, Phil.
Yeah, not very good. And she's got a big power behind her, a big corporate power behind her. So this is probably not ideal.
He's admitted to lying, Patrick.
We're going to have to go over. You take care. Sarah Louise Robertson, their showbiz journalist. I will just stress again, Philip Schofield, nothing illegal. I think that's all I need to say about that. Coming up, the head of MI5 has issued a stark warning today.
I'll finish here with the terrorist trend that concerns me most. The worsening threat from Al-Qaeda, and in particular from Islamic State.
So, would a war in the Middle East actually cause a war here in Britain? I'm going to be talking a lot about that. I'm also going to be talking about whether or not mass migration is making our lives worse. Stay tuned.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead, and by Thursday, things are looking largely dry, but quite a bit colder than of late. For the time being, though, still plenty of wet weather around. Low pressure dominating the story across the UK. It's this low pressure that has brought all the heavy thundery showers many of us have seen through today, and there will be some further showers as we go through the next few hours across England and Wales, but many of them clearing away towards the east overnight. Some persistent rain continuing, though, across parts of northern England and eastern Scotland, so staying pretty soggy here. With quite a bit of cloud around, temperatures won't drop a huge amount, especially in the towns and cities, many places holding up in double figures. There will be generally fewer showers around tomorrow, but there will be some. In fact, even from the start across far southern parts of England, a few showers quite likely, perhaps a little bit drier across central southern parts of Wales and the Midlands for a time, but further north, northern England, plenty of wet weather around, some outbreaks of rain which could be quite heavy, and more persistent rain affecting affecting eastern parts of Scotland. A very soggy start to the day here. As we go through the day, the rain across parts of Scotland and northern England will continue for a time, but it should start to break up as we go through into the afternoon and early evening. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers around, not as many as we've seen through today, and they're not looking quite as intense, less likely to have the odd rumble of thunder, but still some heavy ones possible. And temperatures in the north starting to drop down as we get a northerly wind making its way across the country. That northerly wind then will push its way southwards across pretty much the whole of the country as we go through Thursday, and so that means it is going to be a chillier day, but much fewer showers around. In fact, it's looking largely dry. Yes, some showers around coastal parts, but many places having a dry day on Thursday and sticking with that drier theme until the weekend. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's Chuck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight. Yeah, there's dangerous, brazen foreign criminals that foreign judges say we can't deport. How do we end this madness? Plus...
7 people killed and 48 injured, 21 of them in critical condition. A third major attack in 3 months.
Al-Qaeda and ISIS are on the rise again in Britain, and they're ready to attack. Well, what I want to know is, would a war in the Middle East unleash the Islamist enemy that we've let fester in Britain? Why is the media more obsessed with reporting about the far right? That's what I want to know. Also tonight...
But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step down.
Oof. Starmer has been referred to the police now over potential breaches of electoral law. Will he have to resign? Also tonight.
Bosses got their backs against the wall and they're being questioned. They'll then deliver a sob story.
Every single time Labour's Dawn Butler opens her eyes, she sees more racism. On my panel tonight is columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. We've got the Director of the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and the long-suffering journalist Jonathan Liss. Oh, and... I'm going to take you live to Florida, where Hurricane Milton is set to wreak absolute havoc, supposedly crashing into land whilst I'm on air. So get ready, Britain. Here we go. Britain is full. Next.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie here in the GB newsroom. James Cleverly has overtaken Robert Jenrick to the top spot in the latest round of voting to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Cleverly leads the pack with 39 votes, Robert Jenrick in second with 31 and Kemi Badenoch third on 30. Tom Tugendhat has now been eliminated from the race with only 20 votes. The final 3 candidates will now be whittled down to 2 in the next round of voting tomorrow afternoon. The Director General of MI5 has warned that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are on the rise again, with an increased terror risk linked to the conflict in the Middle East. In a stark warning at the Counter-Terrorism Operations Centre, Ken McCallan revealed that Iran has been linked to at least 20 deadly plots in the UK over the past 2 years. He says both groups are attempting to export terror, highlighting the recently deadly attacks in Moscow as brutal demonstrations of what ISIS is still capable of. As the conflict between Israel and Iran intensifies, MI5 is on high alert for any potential domestic repercussions. Sir Keir Starmer is set for crucial talks in Berlin, joining leaders from the United States, France and Germany this Saturday. The meeting will focus on the ongoing war in Ukraine and the escalating situation in the Middle East. It comes as tensions rise in Lebanon, prompting urgent diplomatic efforts among the so-called Quad nations. The Prime Minister's spokesman says the meeting highlights the UK's commitment to tackling international issues alongside of its allies. And finally, as you've just been hearing, as Hurricane Milton makes its way towards Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis says, if you stay, you will die. Satellite images show the storm churning through the Gulf of Mexico with winds almost reaching up to 180 miles per hour. Forecasters are warning of an 8 to 12-foot storm surge, the highest ever recorded in the region, and widespread flooding. It comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene claimed over 200 lives in the southeastern part of the United States. Well, those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Lewis Mackenzie. More from me in an hour's time. But now it's back to Patrick.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Mass immigration is making Britain worse. We've had the fastest population rise since the 70s. Our population grew by 1% in the last year alone to 68.3 million. And they're just the ones who are here legally. This impacts every single aspect of our lives. Education. 2 in 3 special needs schools are overcrowded, so children with special needs are suffering. For normal schools, class sizes are predicted to rise to 60 pupils per class, and 9 in 10 teachers warn that this will damage a child's education. In Bristol, they've had to use porta cabins as overflow classrooms. In Wales, pupils are being turned down for places in their local school despite living in the catchment area. If you just Google School Places UK, it's full of articles like this. Parents in Sussex complaining about not enough school spots. It's right across the country. That's population growth there, destroying education and ultimately making the next generation thicker. Healthcare. More than 21 million GP appointments involved a wait longer than 22 days between July 2021 and December 2023. The NHS waiting lists were above 7.5 million in June. Here's a video of a queue outside a new NHS dentist surgery in Bristol. And, well, let's take a little look at it and see what you notice there. Lots of people, isn't it? Lots of people. Yep. Well, they're all just waiting for a dental practice. It turns out, by the way, that it's expected to become normal scenes like this if NHS dentists take on more patients. So, kids are getting thicker, and now we're all getting sicker. On housing, the UK housing crisis needs a London-sized city to fix it. We have a city the size of Leeds here illegally, and another 250,000 people waiting for some kind of asylum claim or appeal. And people wonder why the birth rate is falling, because frankly, a lot of British people don't want to have a child when they're squeezed into a bedsit that they already can't afford. The economy. 1.6 million unemployed migrants costing us £8.5 billion a year. And according to the Centre for Policy Studies, migrants from the Middle East, North Africa and Turkey aged between 25 and 64 are almost twice as likely to be economically inactive as someone born in the UK. On crime, foreign criminals are twice as likely as British passport holders to be arrested. The arrest rate for foreign nationals averaged 22.2 per 1,000 of the population, compared to 10.3 per 1,000 for British citizens. So look, mass migration is hammering healthcare, the education system, public safety, the housing market and the economy. But of course, it's all worth it, isn't it? For the lovely, lovely food. Let's get our thoughts on my panel this evening. We've got Esther Krakow, haven't we, there, who is, of course, a columnist and broadcaster. I've also got Stephen Wolfe, the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and Jonathan List, journalist and chief eye roller this evening. Stephen, look, you've seen your job title, I suppose, so I'll go to you first on this. There's various different aspects there of our lives that appear to be directly linked negatively to mass migration, or is that unfair?
No, it's not unfair. Population is a massive driver of how governments have to assess education, health, infrastructure, roads, taxation. All of those are impacted by the numbers of people that live in this country. And so as individuals in this country, you have to ask yourself, how do I live here and live a nice, good, comfortable life? If, as we now know very clearly from the ONS, which is not a political organisation, accepts that net migration has forced this country to have the fastest growth in population, that is also having a direct impact on our population. What do you see? What you see is our government now having to tax us more to fund something that was so obvious in the first place. Mass migration makes the country poorer.
Are you worried about the rate of population growth, do you think, in relation to our public services?
I don't actually understand why talking about this is so controversial. If you have 1 million people moving into this country over the last 2 years, and yet you haven't built a single more mile of road, or doctors are facing increasing pressure because literally the population that they've had to deal with have just increased in orders of magnitude that they're not prepared to handle. Or our public services, for example, haven't received the amount of investment they should, even for a population that stayed stagnant 20 years ago. And then you now worsen that situation with the amount of population increase we've seen. I mean, it's just common sense. I don't really understand why, and I hate this word, but I don't really understand why we get into this toxic debate about, oh, you don't like immigrants, or you're being hostile to foreigners or whatever.
It's just a load of different facts.
I'm sorry, you cannot maintain a good thing if you choose to deliberately undermine the things that make it work.
Can we make it clear here? This is about population growth.
Yeah.
So it's irrespective of what nationality people comes from. And that must be the part that's part of this debate. It's about the size of the population.
Well, so, Jonathan, what Esther said there, which is that this isn't particularly controversial and that you can't, maintain a good thing.
You can't have 20 people living in a 10-bedroom house. Right. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, so what would be your retort to that, then?
Well, for something that's not very important, there seems to be a remarkable obsession with it.
What do you mean it's not important?
Well, no, I thought, what was the first thing you said that Esther had said? I thought you said that she'd said something about...
I said it's not a racial issue. It's just a numbers issue. We have too many people and we just can't cope.
It's about population growth.
I've always said that immigration, the only limit on immigration in this country should be a capacity issue. I don't think that we've reached the capacity of immigration or anything like it. You go outside of any major city in Britain and there's open countryside, and that's not all green belt. There's not all areas of outstanding natural beauty. There is plenty of areas in this country where we can build new towns if necessary, plenty of new infrastructure. We are now seeing a situation in Britain where there are more people dying than being born. Yeah. If it hadn't been for migration, the population of this country would have actually gone down.
But you can argue that people might be having more kids, mightn't they? If they felt as though there were more school places, they had a better place to live, there was a better quality of life.
Well, if we actually valued childcare and sort of invest in that and actually incentivise people to have kids, we can certainly have that conversation.
But Jonathan,
and that's the thing for migration.
If we did not have to spend the taxation on the increasing effect of mass migration and large population growth, we would have more money to be able to spend on a smaller population that would be able to work with it. And that's a very clear economic factor. And even finally, the Treasury is beginning to accept that because of the implication of large-scale migration is having a negative impact on people, with GNP per capita making us poorer each year. We're £100 worse off just because of population growth than we were last year.
Stephen, there are many, many economists and immigration experts
I have a question.
And you actually say that migration has driven up wages.
I have a genuine question. Do you see any link between mass immigration or high levels of immigration or unsustainable levels of massive immigration, population increase and worsening public services? Do you see any link there at all, or housing or anything like that? Or is it just,
No, I see the failure of public services in this country as a result of the last Conservative government in particular's deliberately underfunding of public services.
And I think that's the problem.
Driving them into the ground.
And I think that's the big divide. those who just look at public services only because it's an impact of the Conservative government not being able to spend enough have a blind spot that do not accept that population growth driven by mass immigration has that mass impact. And until they make themselves the alignment on that, we're only going to get worse.
Stephen, sorry for the fact that I think migration, as I've said a million times and will say it till I'm blue in the face, migration is an unqualified good. I will argue it to the day I die, that migration is a very, very good thing. And it's also been a consistent in human history since humans came into.
But you also say,
came on-
Jonathan,
came
with
to
respect, mate, you also say that we haven't hit the capacity point, but then your argument was the reason why we don't think we've hit capacity point is because there's loads of fields in Britain that we can build on.
I'm saying that
Britain
Britain is, I'm saying that you said Britain is full. I'm saying Britain is not full. We can come back to look, Patrick. We can
I would
have a
say
conversation.
England's full.
Patrick, we can have a conversation in 20 years' time about whether we've reached capacity. But the fundamental point is that we, aside from the fact that I'll argue for migration on ideological grounds, we need migrants to actually fund those public services that we were just talking about. Without those migrants coming to work in our public services, they'd be even worse.
I fundamentally disagree. I think there is a way that you can have managed migration into a country by actually increasing productivity, by ensuring that you have services that work to the population as a whole, rather than necessarily importing people. It encourages training. It involves encouraging more people into work and remaining.
It's also a lie that we're getting richer or the country is benefiting economically from having mass migration. It's categorically a lie. It's just not true.
It's just untrue.
So what would you do? What would you do, Esther? Would you put a fixed cap on it? What would you do?
Well, yeah. Gosh, what would I do? First of all, a cap on immigration, well, depends on the industry. But I think overall, actually sticking to certain numbers and trying to bring them down every year is sensible. I'm sorry, you need to clean up Britain's foreign prison population. That's just common sense. We need to actually, I don't want to use the word raid because it's quite emotive, but we need to deport illegal immigrants. They're about, I think the most recent report from an Oxford study was 750,000.
Yeah,
I mean, that's actually, last year was around 1 million. So if it's somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million, that's just not acceptable. We need to actually deport more. But we actually have to encourage people to want to stay, because we're talking about net immigration, right? We're not talking about people that have left, right? Who are we replacing the British people that have left with?
Well, this is it. But, Stephen, in order to make this level of population growth work, we're going to have to dedicate basically all of our time and energy to consistently building new hospitals, new schools, new houses, 24/7.
With an economy that's
basically
growing.
forever. And then we're going to be told, well, in order to do that, we need to import a load more people to do it. And so then what happens is constantly chasing our tail on this, aren't we?
Yeah, 10 years ago, I was in a hotel bar in London talking to the senior CFO of a large-scale housing company that's on the FTSE. And they said then that if you wanted to try and reduce prices in housing, you had to build 1 million houses or apartments in London. That's the number that you used in your heading tonight, 10 years later. And the reason for that, he said, is because we just don't have enough space and housing in the areas where people want to live. And that's a contrary argument, because if you want people to go and live in a nice countryside area in the middle of Wales, there's no jobs for them there. There's no infrastructure for them there. There's no schools for them there. Scotland is the country that's declining in terms of population in here. No one's wanting to live up there. Actually, there's more deaths than there are births, as we've just seen in the report from the ONS. Shove them all up there if you want. Let's take 1.5 of those unemployed people who have come from different countries and let them work up there. But they can't. So that's where the lie to this argument comes in. They want to live in the metropolitan areas where we can't house them.
Well, that's where, but migration is also internal. People have been migrating to the cities from the countryside for centuries. You know, since before.
Yeah, with a job though. A lot of the time. You move having got a job. That's how most people do it.
People move and look for jobs.
Most people will not move to London voluntarily without a job. The only appeal of London, the only appeal of London is a job, because London, it's a crap hole.
Okay,
don't say that.
It is.
Oh, well, you know, it might be going that way. But
am I going to defend something in Britain against the panel for once?
I think go on.
I won't hear a word said against London. It's the best city in the world.
OK, fantastic. One of our presenters got mugged on the other side of the street just a couple of days ago. But you know what? Fine. Absolutely. It's lovely. All right, chaps, going to start again. And
never happened in the north, I guess.
Never happened in the north. No. They just pour gravy over you. Right, it's time for today's Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3 in your bank account each month for the next year. A whopping 36 grand in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need to make that money yours.
This is your...
Coming up, I'll have the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But first, the head of MI5 has issued this stark warning.
Finish here with the terrorist trend that concerns me most. The worsening threat from Al-Qaeda, and in particular from Islamic State.
So would a war in the Middle East cause a war here in Britain? Former Islamist extremist turned extremism behaviour expert Sahel Ahmed joins me live and he's next.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending. And it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in. But it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, OK, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy. Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. All of tomorrow's newspaper front pages are heading your way very soon. But first, the head of MI5, Ken McCallum, issued a stark warning about the UK's terror threat level in a speech earlier today. But with headlines like that, I mean, look at this. So MI5 boss reveals staggering threefold rise in children investigated for terrorism, online memes, drawing them into right-wing ideology. So, by the way, can I just say that Daily Mail headline there? I mean, the Daily Mail, not exactly known for leaning to the left, but Daily Mail headline there, right-wing ideology. Not even far-right anymore. We're just saying that it's extreme to be right-wing. But headlines like that, you'd have been forgiven for thinking this was all the fault of the so-called far-right, which is actually very strange, if you listen to what this chap said, because the MI5 boss eventually got round to talking about what he was most concerned about, and he said this.
We've seen appalling loss of life in Gaza and now Lebanon. and conflict spiralling in the wider region, with all the implications that brings for Middle Eastern and UK security. Today we are powerfully alive to the risk that events in the Middle East directly trigger terrorist action in the UK. I'll finish here with a terrorist trend that concerns me most: the worsening threat from Al-Qaeda, and in particular from Islamic State.
Right, so just so we're clear, you couldn't be clearer, that's the threat that worries him most, yeah? Why did you spend the entirety of your speech up to that point prattling on about the far right then? I can understand that it's a concern, but then all the headlines become about that, as opposed to, you know, what concerns you most? Could it be that you're afraid of something? Anyway, will a war in the Middle East start a war here in Britain? I'm joined now by the former Islamist turned extremism prevention educator, Sahel Alma. Sahel, great to see you again. Thank you very much for coming on the show. So, you know, there we have it, the threat that concerns him most. Do you think that if we have another war that in some way we're involved in the Middle East, that we're just going to see a load of homegrown attacks here?
Whilst I call for calm in this regard, I am deeply concerned about the potential for terrorism to become kind of rife again. I think the last time in which we had a lot of terrorist attacks, it was in 1 year. We had the Manchester Arena attack, we had all the London Bridge attacks, and thankfully since then there's been a lull. But if something were to occur in, say, in the Middle East and Britain and the United States were involved, right? What would then happen is that it would provide a grievance narrative that would then inflame certain individuals who are already radicalized or who are thereby more likely to become radicalized, and therefore they would then potentially engage in acts of terrorism.
And have we not been very naive about this? Have we not kind of allowed this situation to happen, really?
I absolutely agree with you. I think that successive previous governments have failed to manage immigration in the sense that they failed to put in place effective integration policies. And for too long, we've allowed extremism to be rife, to breed in the United Kingdom, even in prisons, the most controlled environments you could imagine. And previous governments and even current governments in the recent era, it's become very clear that many people are afraid to deal with the threat because on the one hand, you have the far left that are essentially calling anyone who attempts to deal with this, including Muslims themselves, as being Islamophobic or racist. And if therefore the government becomes involved, they're also then criticized, and it creates headlines and it causes a headache for the government.
Yeah, and you're absolutely spot on about all of that. We do also appear to have a head of MI5 there who, I listened to his speech today, and for quite a while during it, I really thought it was going to be a speech entirely dedicated to the far right, and we've got all these people now, these young people who are becoming increasingly extreme. And then right at the end, literally says, I will now finish with the thing that concerns me most. Well, I'm sorry, that's not normally the way I would structure something. I would normally lead in with the thing that concerned me most. But then all the headlines and all the chatter in classes get about, look at what's happening with the far right. Now, I don't want to see any far right terror attacks. I don't want to see the rise of genuine far right. I obviously don't want to see that. But we can't get around the idea that we appear to be having it hidden from us, that the major threat here is Islamist terrorism, isn't it?
Firstly, I'd say that when you hide things, or even if it's perceived that you're hiding them, that creates distrust, and that's going to inflame the actual far right even more. Secondly, I'd also point out that whilst the far right threat is more prevalent in a sense, it's more frequent, the actual intensity of it is much lower. Therefore, you don't see any terror attacks. Whereas with Islamists, they're fewer in number, but the intensity is much higher, to the point that they're far more willing to engage in violence. And that should be underscored. But unfortunately, it's kind of creating this impression that for some bizarre reason, the far right is the largest threat. I do not think it is. The largest threat is the Islamist threat. It's very much the case that the far right threat is growing, but it's not got to the point where it is to the point of Islamist extremism.
I do wonder, this is a complete stab in the dark, whether or not there is the ideological difference between maybe some people in the far right who do not wish to actually physically die for their cause, and some people on the Islamist side who almost appear to welcome death as part of their cause. And I wonder if that is one of the things that's behind the discrepancy in the actual number or volume of attacks there. So, Hale, just one final one with you, if that's OK. When it comes to foreign policy now, we see the way that the Middle East is at the moment and the world is at the moment. My concern would be that governments in this country would not necessarily take action that might actually be in the best interest of this country because they fear the fact that there's been, well, frankly, some kind of Trojan horse here. And that would be a problem. Do you think that we're there? The idea that we've allowed a lot of extremism in and allowed it to fester will now mean that we might not always act in the correct manner for ourselves on the world stage?
Let me be clear. What that means is that we've handed over the reins of control to the most extreme elements within our society. That I cannot stress enough. That cannot be allowed to take place because then essentially we've lost control. When British foreign policy is formulated, it needs to be formulated in the British interest. It cannot ever be formulated to appease any extremist form, any extremist kind of trend, any extremist group. That absolutely cannot happen.
OK, look, Sahel, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to get your insight. And as always, whenever we chat, I kind of wish that maybe we had a bit of a longer form thing. Maybe we should try and make that happen at some point. So Sahel Ahmed there, who is a former Islamist turned extremism prevention educator, just reacting to what the head of MI5 has said there, really, which is that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are on the rise here in the UK. And you've got to be concerned, haven't you, when it comes to things that are going on abroad? And is that going to play out on our streets? But coming up, the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages have landed. I'll bring them to you in just a second. And we are going live to Florida. Why? Because Hurricane Milton is apparently wreaking complete havoc at the moment. So we'll take you to it. We'll show you all the very latest. That's next. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead, and by Thursday, things are looking largely dry, but quite a bit colder than of late. For the time being, though, still plenty of wet weather around. Low pressure dominating the story across the UK. It's this low pressure that has brought all the heavy thundery showers many of us have seen through today, and there will be some further showers as we go through the next few hours across England and Wales, but many of them clearing away towards the east overnight. Some persistent rain continuing, though, across parts of northern England and eastern Scotland, so staying pretty soggy here. With quite a bit of cloud around, temperatures won't drop a huge amount, especially in the towns and cities, many places holding up in double figures. There will be generally fewer showers around tomorrow, but there will be some. In fact, even from the start across far southern parts of England, a few showers quite likely, perhaps a little bit drier across central southern parts of Wales and the Midlands for a time, but further north, northern England, plenty of wet weather around, some outbreaks of rain which could be quite heavy, and more persistent rain affecting eastern parts of Scotland. A very soggy start to the day here. As we go through the day, the rain across parts of Scotland and northern England will continue for a time, but it should start to break up as we go through into the afternoon and early evening. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers around, not as many as we've seen through today, and they're not looking quite as intense, less likely to have the odd rumble of thunder, but still some heavy ones possible. And temperatures in the north starting to drop down as we get a northerly wind making its way across the country. That northerly wind then will push its way southwards across pretty much the whole of the country as we go through Thursday, and so that means it is going to be a chillier day, but much fewer showers around. In fact, it's looking largely dry. Yes, some showers around coastal parts, but many places having a dry day on Thursday and sticking with that drier theme until the weekend. Bye-bye.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. I have got all of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, so let's do them. We start with the Metro. Wagatha Thrifty. Rooney versus Vardy court claims revealed. So, £3.50 bottle sparks a £1.8 million legal battle. Can I just say, I am wondering whether or not some people should be allowed access to A, money and B, lawyers. Because millionaire wags Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy are battling it out in court over the cost of water bottles in a hotel minibar. Let it go. Yeah. Let it go. The Eye, MI5 warns about Iran plots on British soil. We touched on that a little bit earlier, in fact, a few minutes ago, yeah. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph. Chancellor looks at cut to pension withdrawals. So tax-free lump sum maybe £100,000 after recommendation from think tanks. So that could be a way of maybe trying to appease the pensioners. There's also a story here. James Cleverly sprints ahead in Tory leadership race.
That man has never sprinted before in his life.
Esther just says that man's never sprinted before in his life, and gosh, I wouldn't ever say such a thing. But James Cleverly is surged into the lead. It's the Conservative leadership race. So that's an interesting one as we look at. I think the final two get announced tomorrow, don't they?
Yeah.
So tomorrow we know the top two. Let's just round it off with the Sun. Exclusive. Cops fury after Mayor and Home Secretary pressed the Met to give Taylor Swift a royal blue light escort. Look at what Taylor made us do.
Seriously?
I mean, are they... Seriously?
Did they really give her a blue light escort?
Oh, why are
Give her
Labour
a blue
so
light card
obsessed with this stuff, like with celebrity? What is it?
Because the thing is, I don't think people realise our government is basically formed of student activists.
Right, who love Taylor Swift.
How many like actual like private sector business people or people who've been successful independently that have nothing to do with public service do you see in the government?
You know what? Let's just say no. I wasn't going to do this, but screw it. Let's just do it. So we've got this. We do also have another story, which in a way ties in, but the same but different. About Keir Starmer being referred to police who are yet to take any action about potential electoral register issues. That's in relation to Lord Ali's property and also his own. So there's that's coming down the track. He said, didn't he, that if the police ever found any wrongdoing during Beer and Cormagate, that he would go. So watch this space. But this on the front of the Sun is the new one. You know, this is Sadiq Khan and Yvette Cooper apparently wanting police to give a blue light royal escort to Taylor Swift.
I don't get it. Would you give it to every singer now? Do we just line them all up? Or is something particularly special about Taylor Swift?
I mean,
she needs maybe they'll give her a blue card next.
Well,
to be able to get 10% off in each shop.
Go on, Jonathan.
I mean, she is the biggest pop star in the world, bar none, and she had literally just had to cancel all her shows in Vienna because of a credible terrorist threat.
Oh, so Vienna.
Is it possible that there were maybe some intelligence that we don't know about potential threats to her security and safety in London? Think about it. If a pop star has just had to cancel their concerts because of a credible terrorist threat in a country nearby, and they're coming to do 9 dates at Wembley Stadium, if you're the Labour government, do you want to avoid any potential threat?
Hold on, it's not a country nearby. It's Austria. It's in Europe.
Right.
It's not nearby.
Okay.
To be fair, I appreciate what you're saying.
No, I get a point.
I mean, can you imagine if there had been something? Can you imagine there had been an attack? Can you imagine if there had been an attack on an attempted attack on Taylor Swift? And what would have happened? The Labour government would have had to answer all questions about why they hadn't protected her.
So you'd have been able to report firsthand.
They can't do right for doing wrong, can they? They just can't win. Why don't we just acknowledge it? They can't win.
People have lost a lot of respect for Labour because they seem to be very keen on doing favours for their friends and their unions, but then they forget everyone else. I wouldn't personally have a problem with this if it was in a different context, but you know, this is the same party that are happy to cut. Again, I keep harping on about the winter fuel payments, but it feels like they're letting the average person down. But if you're in the right circles, if you're a Lord Ali, if you're donating millions of pounds to the Labour Party, you somehow get a free pass with most things. And I think that's not right.
Maybe one thing we could both agree, Jonathan, is that if it was Oasis, then I would be banging in favour of a blue royal escort. So there we go. We are going to go...
Not off the Ticketmaster bar.
No, actually, oh yeah, gosh, you went complete reverse ferret on that. Fair enough. Anyway, right, we are going now to Florida. Yay! Residents are preparing for the worst as Hurricane Milton makes its way towards the Sunshine State, which might now have to change its name. It is currently under 300...
Well, Milton's not a really nice name, is it?
Milton.
Yeah.
That's a dog's name,
Just
isn't
remembers the milk bottles as you were kids.
Named after the poet John, no doubt.
OK, all right, I'm going to crack on, guys. All right, so it's currently under 300 kilometres off the southwest coast of Florida. Winds of up to 155 miles an hour are expected. More than 1 million people have been advised to evacuate. I mean, this is a proper stuff. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has actually warned people to prepare for major impacts. He said leave or die, which... bit extreme. Joining me down the line from St. Petersburg in Florida is Tampa Bay Times reporter Colleen Wright. Colleen, it's great to see you. So, I mean, how bad are we expecting this to be?
We're expecting it to be pretty bad. Even if your house might not flood from historic 10 to 15 feet of storm surge, even if your house is still here from winds, we're looking at potentially a week or more without power, and that's maybe a conservative estimate.
Ron DeSantis has said leave or die, apparently. I can't help but notice you appear to have stayed. So, why?
Yes. So where I live is actually not under evacuation and not in a flood zone. However, I am also evacuating tomorrow morning. But I'm going to a shelter that's just a few miles away. And that's a message that's being pushed out is you don't even have to go to another state or drive very far. Some of the highways are jammed. You could just go to a shelter that's built to withstand hurricanes. And that's exactly what I'm doing because I fully expect to lose power. I lost power for 2.5 days with Hurricane Helene literally less than 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and is this expecting to be worse than that? I mean, some of these images from space are absolutely terrifying. In fact, there was even one actually from, I think it was the International Space Station. It was certainly someone who was up there. And, I mean, it's just ridiculous, the size of this thing.
Yeah, it's quite scary. And the Tampa Bay area has not suffered a direct hit since 1921. And people are taking it seriously. I think, we had several deaths here in Pinellas County. That's the county that the Gulf beaches, very densely populated. We had over a dozen people die. And I think people are spooked about that. I think people are taking it seriously, and we are seeing shelters fill up.
Gosh, and, people are... I mean, this is a serious, potential loss of life hurricane that, the likes of which has not been seen on this scale for quite a while, is it? And these shelters, I mean, there's a million people. I mean, look, by the way, this is what you're watching on your screen now. It's from Cancun. So this presumably is on its way. Some of that lightning and the way that it's just thundering into the ground there is just unbelievable. Are you going to end up seeing, what, millions of people possibly clustered into these shelters?
I wouldn't say millions. Most people are leaving to go to friends and family, either in state, somewhere else in the state. I've seen folks go to West Palm Beach, Miami, even more inland like Orlando, Ocala, the Panhandle, but some are going to Georgia, Alabama, and some are going to shelters. It just depends on what your arrangements are and what works for your family. If you have special needs, if you have pets, that's why it's so important for Floridians who live here to make a plan. My plan, I'm a journalist. I need to stay kind of close by, but I also need to take care of myself. So my plan is to go to a local shelter nearby.
And then when it is all kicking off, if you can, are you going to be trying to get out there and get video footage and talk to people? Because, I mean, that does sound incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, not if it's not safe. Not if it's not safe to go out and drive. I would never put myself in harm's way. It's just not worth it. There will be, unfortunately, plenty to cover in the aftermath. The mayor here in the city of St. Petersburg is already talking about rebuilding.
Gosh, grief. OK, well, look, you stay safe. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us this evening. Very finally, I have a panellist here who thinks that she's going to Florida in the next 2 days. Do you reckon that flight will take off and land there?
Where is it landing?
Miami? Miami.
2 days? Maybe not.
OK, all right.
Maybe. I'm not sure. Not in Miami, but maybe not. Maybe pick another time.
OK, all right. Well, hey, look, we'll see, won't we? But on a very serious note, genuinely, please do take care. And it's lovely to talk to you and all the best. Chat to you again very, very soon. OK, all right. So, well, watch this space when it comes to what's going on over there in the States. Yeah, we'll move on for that, Esther.
I'm not talking to you.
OK, well, it's a shame because I was going to ask you about about... I'm going to have to ask you after the break. We stay too long in America, unlike... yeah. Coming up, I'll bring you the very best of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, Italian wine in Britain is worth a whopping £891 million and can be described as a Prosecco phenomenon, apparently. So joining us now to tell us more about why these Italian bubbles are so popular is Ed Smith, the founder of The Emissary, a British-based Prosecco brand. Good morning, Ed.
Morning, guys.
Thank you for coming in, and you've done just as we asked. You've come laden with booze and bottles and glasses.
Exactly.
So the definition of Prosecco, Tatiana, you were saying earlier, is sparkling wine that's been made in certain areas of Italy. Which areas?
Exactly. So the Prosecco region is northeast Italy. It's about sort of an hour north of Venice, foothills of Dolomite Mountains. Very, very beautiful part of Italy. Veneto, exactly. Well done.
Show off.
I'm half Italian, so...
well, there we go. OK, you should be teaching me.
No, that's it.
So, yeah, so like Champagne, that has to come from the Champagne region in France. Prosecco has to come from the Prosecco region in Italy. And it's different to Champagne and other sparkling wines, like English sparkling wine, in that geography, like we just mentioned, has to come from that region in Italy. The grapes that are used are different. So Prosecco has to be at least 85% Glera, which is the native grapes of the region. And it's most importantly the method. So Champagne and English sparkling wines use the traditional method, where second fermentation, which produces the bubbles, happens in the bottle. Whereas Prosecco uses what's called the Charmat method. So the second fermentation happens in steel vats. It's a much quicker process, and that's why Prosecco is a bit more affordable.
So the Emissary is a British-based Prosecco brand.
Yeah.
So is it made in the UK?
No, made in Italy.
Yeah, that's why you can call it Prosecco.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't call it Prosecco unless it's made in those two regions.
Great. So can we get stuck into some of these? That's the most important
Absolutely.
thing of this morning.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight. Got a couple more front pages for you now. So here's the Daily Mail. Russia is plotting mayhem in Britain. MI5 chief's chilling warning about Putin's spies. He reveals that the UK also faces a staggering threat from radicalised teens. Let's go to The Guardian. Reeves presses ahead with plans to borrow billions for investment. I'll be honest with you, I thought that was Prince Harry, but it's not Prince Harry with a cat. It's a man... A man gets ready to evacuate from... It's in The Guardian now. A man gets ready to evacuate from Florida. There we go. So there we are. Right, cleverly in top spot as well, they talk about. Right, good stuff. So those are your papers. Now, I just wanted to just whiz us on to a story that... was mainly going around on social media, but I thought I'd bring to your attention. So last time Labour MP Dawn Butler posted a Black History Month video, she was forced to apologise and remove elements of that video after it emerged that she used photographs of convicted rapists and murderers. But she just can't help herself because she's back at it. This time she's talking about structural discrimination.
When the big bosses got their backs against the wall and they're being questioned, they'll then deliver a sob story for the mediocre person.
If you don't know Rachel's story, in 2008, she was locked in a room crying.
The point is they might have had a hard life, they might have struggled, but are they the best person for the job? And that's the structure of it, because they're trying to take away all of the stuff that made them put this person in because they liked them. They're one of them. They're in the club. They're the right skin colour. They're the right class. That is what we have to change.
Right, so do you think that every time Dawn Butler opens her eyes she sees something racist, or has she got a point?
No, I think she just finds racism behind every tree. On a serious note, I think there is... I think there are many politicians that suffer with this problem, which is judgment and thinking when it's appropriate to say something and not to say something. I don't really think there's much to be gained from trying to defend rapists and murderers. That's just my like. I think she could have lived a very comfortable life, not having to do this.
Yeah, I do wonder with that, to be fair.
But many politicians lack judgment.
I'm not sure she realised who they were, but yeah, I get what you mean.
Right. And it's not her fault. I don't think she actually knew. I don't think.
Well, if she did know, then that's ridiculous. But yeah.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, a lot of these people have young university graduates that work for them on these things. So, I wouldn't hold it against her.
Well, go on. Go on, Jonathan. What do you reckon to that? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, not that I'm massively invested in the the Australian breakdance scene. But I did feel a little bit sorry for that woman who was at the Olympics, because not only was she outed as a completely rubbish breakdancer, but now Dawn Butler's essentially saying she's a racist.
Well, I felt a bit sorry for her anyway, to be honest, because I think that the backlash against her was completely hysterical. Look, I need to see Dawn Butler's whole clip to comment on it, really, just from that sort of small one. I don't really have much to say about it. Clearly, there is a lot of racism in the world. I don't know if the breakdancer had done anything racist. You might think it's a little bit uncharitable to pick on somebody as an example of a bigger problem when they might not. You know, it's not as though she is deliberately excluded. I mean, to my knowledge, I don't think that she deliberately excluded superior breakdancers made from ethnic minorities so she could go to Paris. But I don't know, so I can't really comment any further than that.
OK, cool. What do you reckon, Stephen? Do you think there's a risk here that Dawn Butler is almost like pumping out too much of this stuff?
Firstly, as someone who did breakdancing in 1985, was Manchester's first breakdance champion, I actually found the Australian pathetic.
What?
Yeah, it's another story. It goes back long time. Used to do windmills and used to do the hand spins and head spins. Oh, yeah.
Go on.
I'm not going to do it here on the stage now. I might do it on there.
Can we make this happen? Is there any way we can make this happen?
I know.
We've got shots. We can make it happen. Do it.
I'm not going to do it now.
OK, all right, fair enough.
It's
next
far
week.
Too dangerous anyway. But,
next week, far too dangerous, yeah.
But the point is...
Was anyone here concerned about health and safety?
Yeah, but...
Woke nonsense.
Don't be stupid.
Come on. Woke nonsense, Patrick.
Health and safety.
If I do...
Bloody woke lefties, a lot of you. Come on.
Might get more money from it.
Get on your feet and do it.
But the point was, we used to... Okay, come on, flip on that.
All right, I'm going to... Guys.
Dawn Butler just finds racism in the back of every car boot, and I find it offensive because she just is that sort of person that does not accept that people of colour, black people, Asians can succeed irrespective.
All right.
How did you think of that? Behind every car boot?
Look, we're going to have to.
I just don't know where she gets it from.
We're going to have to whiz it on.
She removes any argument of inequality by the ridiculous statement she makes.
OK, all right. We're going to have to whiz it on now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. It's been a lively show, hasn't it? Greatest Britain, please,
Christine
Esther.
Smith.
Yes. So Christine Smith is... I'm very glad that you've nominated Christine Smith. Christine Smith is the wonderful lady that I met yesterday at the pensioners' protest from the Newcastle Weir and Tyne Waspy Women group. Here's a clip.
Nearly 300,000 waspy women have already died. Your own research has told you another 4,000 will die this winter from removal of the winter fuel allowance.
Well done. She's the self-funded to come down from the North East to come and tell the politicians that they wanted a little bit more support for, well, quite a lot more support, actually, for pensioners. So, massive stuff. And I'm reliably informed that a load of the waspy women from the North East are watching tonight. So if you are, hello. Right, who's your Greatest Britain, please?
Well, I can't compete with that, but I was going to say Dominic Cummings for actually doing over Emily Matus. Dominic does not like me, makes it very clear he didn't like me, but notwithstanding that, I love the fact that he put Emily Matus in a place about the EU's procurement policies over COVID vaccines. She was totally wrong, she's made a fool of herself, and he corrected her.
OK, go on then, Jonathan.
Louise Haigh, Transport Secretary, for taking the university popular decision of getting rid of the advertising board at Euston, which was quite dangerous because people had to sort of flock to those much smaller boards to see their trains, so the platform gets announced 2 minutes before the train leaves, and so you have quite dangerous overcrowding at Euston. It's a terrible station. But on the flip side, she's now announcing likely that HST will in fact go to Euston rather than terminating in the middle of nowhere in West London. So at least let's just do one thing right with the long-term infrastructure in this country, for God's sake.
Fine. Good stuff, actually, that. I am, of course, going for this week's winner being Christine Smith. So thank you very, very much. And it was great to meet you yesterday, and I hope to see you again at the next pensioners' protest. Who's your Union Jackass, please?
Boris Johnson.
OK. Particular reason?
His smug pontificating. Constantly. Can he just vanish?
Not a fan. Well, no is the answer, because I hope he's going to be on the chart soon. But anyway,
I wanted to nominate him too, by the way.
Oh, sorry. OK, go on.
Well, I'm obviously going for Super Sambuca Duka, the Albanian criminal who drives around a 300,000.
Honestly, I don't know.
All right. This is the guy. He's an Albanian criminal that they've
nice callback. I like it. It's very nice to have a callback to the programme.
And if you look, he's wearing a breakdancing jacket.
OK, and you've gone for?
I've gone for
Benjamin
a war
Netanyahu, I
criminal
believe.
who's currently the Prime Minister of Israel for continuing his assault on Lebanon in particular, which is completely outrageous.
All right, I'm going for Super Sambuca, what's-his-face, Puka, who, Dorian, who has been kept in the country thanks to the ECHR. Right, OK, thank you very much, everybody. Lovely stuff. I've run out of time. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 p.m.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Looking ahead, and by Thursday, things are looking largely dry, but quite a bit colder than of late. For the time being, though, still plenty of wet weather around. Low pressure dominating the story across the UK. It's this low pressure that has brought all the heavy thundery showers many of, and there will be some further showers as we go through the next few hours across England and Wales, but many of them clearing away towards the east overnight. Some persistent rain continuing there across parts of northern England and eastern Scotland, so staying pretty soggy here. With quite a bit of cloud around, temperatures won't drop a huge amount, especially in the towns and cities, many places holding up in double figures. There will be generally fewer showers around tomorrow, but there will be some. In fact, even from the start across far southern parts of England, a few showers quite likely, perhaps a little bit drier across central southern parts of Wales and the Midlands for a time, but further north, northern England, plenty of wet weather around, some outbreaks of rain which could be quite heavy, and more persistent rain affecting eastern parts of Scotland. A very soggy start to the day here. As we go through the day, the rain across parts of Scotland and northern England will continue for a time, but it should start to break up as we go through into the afternoon and early evening. Elsewhere, a scattering of showers around, not as many as we've seen through today, and they're not looking quite as intense, less likely to have the odd rumble of thunder, but still some heavy ones possible. And temperatures in the north starting to drop down as we get a northerly wind making its way across the country. That northerly wind then will push its way southwards across pretty much the whole of the country as we go through Thursday, and so that means it is going to be a chillier day, but much fewer showers around. In fact, it's looking largely dry. Yes, some showers around coastal parts, but many places having a dry day on Thursday and sticking with that drier theme until the weekend. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You really... Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Please tell me that we're British. In our darkest hour, we can work around this. The beer will still be flowing at Christmas. Tell me, please.
Martin, without using bad language, there's no words to describe that this is another major blow to the hospitality sector. I wake up every day with anxiety thinking, what's going to happen to us now? Oh my God, now the weather's against us. Not only are the government absolutely battering us, then the weather's now hitting us as well.
Kate Stewart, this can only mean one thing. Prices, once again, going through the roof.
And there's nothing we can do. We have on costs. We have to buy from the brewery. We have the VAT. We have then the VAT, what we take. It is an absolute nightmare. To be in the pub game now, Martin, is very, very difficult. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Everything just keeps hammering us from every different direction. And obviously, we have to pass that on to the customers, then price increases. There's nothing we can do. We don't want to sell beer at an inflated price. We want it as cheap as possible to get people through them doors. But we have no option. They're going to go up again in the new budget. You know, there's no help for us. What are we supposed to do, Martin, except the only option is to close the doors and say, enough is enough. We can't do this anymore. I absolutely cry my eyes out having to put the prices up because you think, oh, my God, people are just going to turn away and walk. But we can't swallow the costs all the time, Martin. It's impossible for us to do because we will go bankrupt. There has to be, there's inflation getting hammered on us yet again, and we have to pass it on. I feel it when I take my children out for something to eat. You're like, wow, that has just cost a fortune. But what is the answer? The answer is the government needs to look at saving the hospitality sector and stop being so greedy in everything that they take away from us, or there won't be pubs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie here in the GB newsroom. James Cleverly has overtaken Robert Jenrick to the top spot in the latest round of voting to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Cleverly leads the pack with 39 votes, Robert Jenrick second with 31 and Kemi Badenoch third on